Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most innovative founders and VCs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. I didn't really realize what this episode was about until I finished the editing. Oh, don't worry, I'll be introducing you to an innovative founder in just a minute, and we'll dive deep into their business and their market. But this episode is really about stereotypes. How much truth they really have and why they stay with us, and what we can do to change both the perceptions and the realities that underlie them. Today we sit down with Kunio Hara, co-founder and CEO of Beatrust, a startup that's focused on getting Japanese enterprises to break from their hierarchical structures and let their employees collaborate. Listeners who have spent time in Japan know that this is not an easy task. But as we explore this subject, it becomes clear that both the reality and the solutions are not as straightforward as the stereotypes suggest. We also explore the stereotype of the young, rebel startup founder. And man, that is a pervasive one. In 2007, a 22-year-old Mark Zuckerberg famously declared that, quote, "young people are just smarter." Paul Graham explained in 2013 that investors tend to be skeptical of any founder who is over 32 years old. However, if you take the time to look at the real-world results, the data actually show that older founders are much more likely to have a large value exit than younger founders. Kunio started Beatrust in his late 50s, and we talk about the positives and the negatives associated with that. But Kunio tells that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. So I'm sitting here with Kunio Hara, the co-founder and CEO of Beatrust, who is modernizing corporate collaboration and culture in Japan. So thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Long time no see.
Yeah, it has been a while since you were at Google. So Beatrust is focused on helping employees collaborate. This is important. Everyone agrees it's important.
Yeah.
But it's hard. So what is Beatrust doing differently in this space?
We call our service talent collaboration tools because we try to define the new space and compare it with other HR tech, especially talent management. What we do is mainly to help large organizations drive and facilitate more autonomous collaboration across functions.
Okay. Yeah. That's challenging. And in a bit, I want to dive deep into exactly how you do that. But before that, tell me about your customers. So who's using Beatrust?
Obviously, large enterprise customers, they want to transform their culture to more innovative oriented. But uniqueness about the product is we don't always go to one specific divisions. That we go to a lot of different organizations such as R&D, sales, or maybe even new business development. Because they really need to facilitate those autonomous collaboration across different functions.
Okay. Yeah. Now, this is something you and I have talked about before. I mean, we first met back when we were at Google, and you and Masato Kume left Google to start Beatrust in 2020. So why? What was your vision?
So when I was at Google, I led a couple of interesting projects. One is Olympics, and the other one is startups. And the last one is more like, DX support for Japanese enterprise. And for the last project, we had a lot of meetings with Japanese executives. And the main theme of those meetings, how they can make more innovation, simply, right? So Japan lost 30 years, for making innovations. And they go far behind US companies, such as Google and Microsoft and Amazon. And they want to understand why they were not able to make innovation like, those, big US IT companies. I realized a couple of things because Japanese organization they have a lot of good employees, right? Many good employees. And sometimes management vision is very good. But why other organizations, they cannot make innovation? That time I was within Google, so I tried to understand what's the difference between US IT company like Google and Japanese traditional large enterprise. And then I found maybe two main causes. One is culture, because culture is the essence of the innovation. When I was Google, we had about 120,000 employees, right? Usually with that size, organization become very structured. So it's very hard to make, collaboration across different functions. But, Google had a, preserved good culture, very open, flat, communication style.
So is your goal kind of to bring a Google vibe or Google structure to corporate Japan?
Of course, it's not easy to import
No.
that kind of culture, right, from a US company to Japanese company, because Japanese company has also good culture.
Yeah.
100 years, 20 years, very good culture. But for innovation perspective, maybe they are not so good fit, right, anymore. So that's why they have to adapt, right? But not easy to transform.
Well, actually, that's one thing that's always fascinated me. Because I agree, what you're saying is almost common sense among people who study innovation. But when you look at Japanese companies in the 60s and 70s, they had the same hierarchy, the same rigid structure, but they were incredibly innovative. So is it just the structure? Is there something else missing?
I think what the market demands really changing. Maybe Japan is good at focusing on one thing. So they want to create some product in a very efficient way, good quality. That's the strength of our Japanese business used to be. But now they need to have more, consolidated, more hybrid type business or hybrid type of product and services with technology. So in that case, they have to collaborate more and more across different functions because they really need different expertise and skill set.
That's really interesting. And I guess you're right. If you're looking back into like the 60s and 70s, it was definitely innovative, but the product cycles were much longer.
Right.
These were products that were marketed and the fundamental product would continue for years or decades. And now, especially in the software age, life cycles are a couple of years at most.
Right. We can imagine, 3 years ago, there was no generative AI in the market. So that speed, the Japanese organization was not able to adapt.
Okay. Another thing I think that's very unique about the Beatrust story, and your story in particular, is that the image we have of founders is always some 20-something new college graduate, but that's not really true. And in your case especially, I mean, you were a Google exec for about 7 years, and you worked at Microsoft for 3 or 4 years before that.
Right.
And you were in your late 50s when you started Beatrust, right?
Exactly, yes.
So what were some of the trade-offs you considered when you were starting?
Yeah, I think the starting company doesn't matter any ages. And the seniority provides a lot of, good things, right? Because you have know-how, you have experience, you have connections. So we should leverage those, assets. But at the same time, senior people don't have more updated sense of the market. And I think I have energy, but of course, younger people have more energy.
Yeah.
They can mainly work for 24 hours. But it's a kind of a combination. And the why I was able to start up a company because I had a partner, Kume-san. He's much younger than me. It then can be a good synergy. I think more and more Japanese senior people should aim at founding the new business because they have those expertise and background and relationship. And young people don't have, right? So that could be a good synergy.
I think that's especially true when selling enterprise software. It's incredibly important to understand the problem you're trying to solve. And the people without those experiences won't be able to understand the customer's real problems.
Yeah.
I think that kind of interaction is incredibly important for innovation, being able to communicate as peers despite age differences, which is hard in Japan. Even back at Google for Startups, one of the most common problems was we'd have a 35-year-old founder who had just hired a 55-year-old head of sales. And both sides really had trouble with the management structure. even when they really wanted it to work, it was just so much against Japanese culture. And we set up kind of protocols and worked with them to get them through it. And it worked out great in the end. But it's really challenging in Japan to get past these types of cultural blocks.
Yeah, so of course, that depends on the personality, right? For senior people, usually, they have their own idea, very structured, very solid. But for creating new things or working for startups, they have to have very high kind of unlearning capability.
Right.
Because always they can't catch up. They need to learn from new things. So that kind of unlearning capability is very important. And for young generation, they always have to be flexible, open, and listen, right? Because they need to respect the seniority sometimes, and they need to respect senior experiences. So that kind of personality is very important to work as a partner, I think.
Well, MIT published research a couple of years ago that showed the average founder age of high-tech startups in the US was like 42 years old. It's not like the 20-somethings. And that a 50-year-old founder was twice as likely to have a successful exit as a 30-year-old founder. So the reality is very different from the image.
Yeah.
Why do you think this image persists?
But I think it's changing.
Yeah.
Right. As you know, when we started to support Japanese startups, maybe 10, 20 years ago, perception about startups was very different, right? We don't call it startup. We used to call it venture.
Ventures, yeah.
Right. Or venture, no, that's not good for, talented people. That's for the drop out of college people. They can't work for a large established company. That's why they have to do their own business. We really look down the venture business in general. But now it's changing, right? Startup is a very dream job, especially for top talents of top Japanese university, because University of Tokyo student, they are not interested in working with established company. They really want to, start from startups.
What do you think was the trigger that changed the thinking from venture to startup?
Because I think Japanese enterprise are not changed much against young people's expectation. That's one thing. And also, there are successful Japanese startups born, so they want to look them as a kind of showcase for their next steps. So that success of startups really motivated younger generation. Maybe we can do the same thing. And I think all Japanese companies not changed enough to attract those young talented students.
Let's talk about Beatrust and your approach. There's so much enterprise software out there that promises better collaboration, but very few deliver on that promise. So why is this hard? Why is this such a hard problem to solve?
In general, a lot of large organizations are structured in silos. Of course, management, they want to change, but still sometimes very top-down approach, low psychological safety. So even people get the tools, but they are not used to using the tool to make that kind of collaboration because they don't feel necessity to do collaboration. And with a lower psychological safety, they can't move freely. They always look at the faces of the managers. Right? So they can't make open, comments and questions. So that really prevents them from being free and openly collaborative.
You make a really good point there. People talk a lot about the importance of DX, of digital transformation. But a lot of times I think companies are just using these digital tools to avoid talking about and addressing deep cultural problems that need to change. And that's why things are so hard to change. So how do you get past that? How do you actually start to address the culture and not just sell software?
Of course, we had some problems and struggles to really promote collaboration tools to Japanese large organizations. Our approach is we try to approach one specific organization, not entire company. And one specific organization, they have very strong needs to collaborate. And we help them to really facilitate the collaboration and make showcase. And that showcase can be promotable, success stories, both within the organization and then, maybe they can replicate
So would you be targeting like a sales department or a programming team, or what would a typical initial target look like?
The target could be three. One is R&D, sales, and new business, and DX. Different reasons, but every organization needs collaboration. For example, like for R&D sections, because R&D sections' mission is to create new things for the future of the company. To create new things, they need more ideation, because engineer has a lot of different skill set. Maybe semiconductor engineer needs to talk to chemical engineers. The chemical engineer needs to bioengineers, and they make create new things, right? So that's why R&D section has a big demand for collaboration across different organizations. And sales organization has a different reason. Their driver is how to make more sales. But to make more sales, they need more expertise. They need to share knowledge and experience. For example, like one person really wants to sell this product to a medical doctor, but he has not sold this product to the medical doctor. But somewhere in your company has sold the same product to medical doctor.
So you can connect those two.
You can connect with those pieces.
About how big is the kind of divisions you're targeting? Would it be 20 people or 200 people for the initial group you're working with?
Usually we start from maybe a couple hundred people.
Oh, that feels about right. Yeah. So it's not too big, but it's big enough that you definitely don't know everybody.
Right.
One thing that strikes me that you are doing very differently from all the other communication software SaaS packages out there, almost all the products in the market are sold to HR departments.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all focused on employee evaluations and assignments and training. And I think by going through the operational divisions, you're kind of bypassing that.
Yeah. It's pros and cons to go to HR department, because pros of, if HR lady wants to use a system, then we can deploy at an enterprise level from day one. But at the same time, sometimes HR people are not too strategic, more operational. So in that case, we should go to the divisions first. They really need to run the business, and collaboration is the key for running the business. It's easier for us to convince those division level first and make showcases.
That makes a lot of sense. I 100% agree with this vision. It's needed. And when we were at Google, we had these kind of tools that we used every day. And it really did help with collaboration and innovation. At its core, connecting the right people really is the magic. Even like the original magic of Silicon Valley, I think, was simply connecting people, right? Having the framework to get useful people talking to each other and working together. And because of that, it became this gathering place of dreamers and creative people. But applying this in a Japanese business culture, the control of information and resources is the main way that buchos and kachos kind of maintain their influence inside an organization. So do they sometimes view Beatrust as threatening?
Yes, when we deploy the system, usually we provide not only just the tools, but also kind of consulting support. Because people need to understand why we need collaboration. Why, the psychological safety is important. So that kind of thing we have to convey. And then usually we ask the company to assign some key members. We call ambassadors. And those ambassadors carry the flag. They try to utilize the solution. And usually those people are either young generation or maybe people from outside. Typical standing block is more middle management who work for the company for years. And they don't understand why we need to collaborate. That's the middle management, typically. So it's not easy to change their mindset.
Yeah, I agree. We're getting into, I think, one of the biggest cultural blockers to innovation in Japan. So ideally, every big company should want its engineers to be able to talk with its sales staff and exchange ideas, but that's almost not allowed at most large Japanese companies. People will get angry at you if you try to jump across divisions like that. And I know that senior management, the C-suite, want that to change very, very bad. And the freshmen, the new hires, want that to change very, very bad.
Yeah.
But as you say, there's 7 layers of middle management between those two groups that usually oppose it. So is that consulting enough? How do you win them over?
To create hero cases, very important. Even middle management, can use a system to make some personal success. That could be hero story. And then other middle management can be influenced by other middle management. Okay, maybe we can do differently, then we can have another success. So keep creating some success cases is very important. It takes time, but it's changing.
Kunio, you seem very optimistic about the ability of Japanese enterprise to start innovating.
Right. But I think it's a matter of time, right? Everything can be changed.
Okay. I want to read, like, on your site, I'm going to read you something from your site. So on your site, you say, the common thread behind such innovations is an open and flat organizational culture that encourages its teams to aim high and autonomous collaboration among a diverse workforce, which I agree. But how many Japanese firms live up to that?
But I think as far as I communicate with the management level, they are really aiming for that direction. But usually they don't know how to do it. So we just provide the tools, but tool is not good enough. So that's why we provide some, consulting practice. But that's not good enough either. So we have to keep developing some, innovative tools to help them to transform.
I think that transforming of the culture is an interesting thing. So I've worked at TEPCO and I've worked at Google, and I don't think you will find 2 enterprises on the planet with a more different corporate culture than those 2 organizations.
Right, opposite side.
Just completely opposite. But both kind of had pluses and minuses. Like in TEPCO, well, for one thing, you always knew who could make a decision, right? There was a strict hierarchy. You knew who that person was. In Google, if it's a little decision, you always know. But if it's like a big decision that you have to coordinate 3 or 4 groups, sometimes it wasn't too clear. But I cannot imagine transforming one of those structures into the other in either direction. It just seems like something that would have to come up organically. But do you envision like Japanese companies to move to a more matrix, flat hierarchy like Google? Or do you imagine something in between?
Could be hybrid style. We have to leverage Japanese strengths, right? Japanese cultural strengths. And also we have to learn from, very structured and sophisticated, efficient work style from US organizations. I think hybrid style is better. But to change themselves is very important anyway. Especially large organizations very struggling to retain good talents. Because young talents are very sensitive about those market trends.
But do you think the hierarchical management style, it seems so deep in Japanese culture, even going back to school days where you have this senpai-kohai relationship that never changes. You can be in your 50s and you still have the senpai-kohai from high school.
Right.
That structure is so deep in Japanese society. It seems like something that can't be just worked around or how do you envision the hybrid? Do you imagine just like keeping the hierarchy but allowing communications to flow between it? What's kind of the ideal hybrid for Japan?
I think that depends on vertical markets because some markets really needs to be hierarchical. Maybe TEPCO is one, right? Because they take care of the people's safety, people's life. So in that case, more hierarchical work style is better to keep those important lessons of the business. But some other market, they really need more innovative idea. They need more transformative product development style. That type of organization need to be changed to more US organizational style, I think. But even one vertical market, for example, the auto industry, so they have to transform from gasoline style to more EV styles. They really need to transform all the skill set of the employees to be more innovative towards EV business. So to some extent, I think, all the market need to change, but degree of the necessity of transform could be changed from one industry to industry. But US organization also may need to change.
Like how so?
Because they're becoming global and they have to adapt a lot of different cultures. To me, the Google and Microsoft type successful IT companies, they are more very strong autonomy from the headquarters side. And Japan organization completely different. Even though they call them as a global company, very decentralized in some sense.
Well, I think that's always been true. The most successful foreign companies in Japan have been run very differently from their parent companies. And in fact, in the 90s or the 80s and 90s, people would joke that the most Japanese company was IBM.
Right.
Because they were so traditionally run.
Right. But what do you think? U.S. organization also want to change their kind of organizational style, or
I don't know. I think business follows whatever's working now. So back in the 90s, when Japan was, number one, everyone wanted to study the Japanese approach and become more like Japan. And when that stopped working, people wanted to study other approaches. And I think now, certainly since the late 90s, the startup culture, the rapid software innovation has become the dominant source for innovation. And so people want to study whatever's working. And some of the lessons, the just-in-time delivery system, there's a lot of, Kaizen, all of this that came out of that Japanese leadership is still with us. But I think this is just a new generation of techniques that everyone needs to study and figure out. And maybe in 10 or 15 years, it'll be different. And we'll all be studying a brand new model, trying to learn new techniques. But hopefully the best of what we're seeing now will stay with us.
Yeah, I heard from American friends that even with the U.S. company, they find difficult to retain good talents.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe top 3% good talents is very popular, so they can move very easily. But those talents are not only motivated by the competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are more I think emphasis on excitement. I can find exciting jobs and projects within the company.
I think it's excitement. It's also the team you're with, just the general enjoyment of the work. And I think there is an interesting middle ground between Japan and the US, which again are kind of extremes here, where the US model is you expect employees to churn and turn over very quickly, and they do. And in Japan, you expect employees to stay around a lot longer. I mean, lifetime employment is mostly a thing of the past, but generally employees will stay with a company longer. The companies are much slower to lay people off in Japan. It's just a very different model with pluses and minuses.
How the employee can feel, okay, I can work on exciting project at this company, or maybe I can grow myself. And also culture is important. I like this company culture. I like the people. That kind of element is getting more and more important.
And that makes sense why collaboration is so important, because it allows employees to reach out across lines and maybe find something they can be passionate about and make a contribution.
Right. I visited HR Tech conference last year in Vegas, and I know that the talent marketplace is very popular in the US. So it's more like talent mobility. So if you go to the company in the morning, the AI can recommend you, okay, Tim, this is a new project for you. How are you interested in this? Join the new project team or not? Every day. It's more project-based work style. If you join this project, maybe you can get this kind of experience, this kind of trust, and you can be promoted. How you're interested in this new project, why don't you challenge it? That's very extreme, right? So every day you have a new job offer. But in Japan, maybe 10 years behind, or maybe 20 years, or it never happens.
Yeah. I think that might be too extreme for Japan.
Yeah. Of course, that's not for every US company.
Right.
That was very interesting.
All right. Well, listen, Kunio, before I let you go, I want to ask you what I call my magic wand question. And that is, if I gave you a magic wand and I told you that you could change one thing about Japan, anything at all, the education system, the way people think about hierarchies, the way people communicate, I mean, anything at all to make it better for startups and innovation in Japan, what would you change?
Magic wand.
Magic wand.
Maybe this is only for my age, but don't look at their own interest. How you can think your solution and product can be dedicated to the society or maybe world business. So that kind of notion is very important, I think.
So do you mean more of thinking more globally about what your product can do or trying to solve global problems? What do you mean?
Of course, global mindset is very important, but at the same time, in other words, not chasing for only the money. How we can dedicate the product to enhancing the society itself. Of course, to run the startup is very challenging. Right? You have to always keep, driving the revenue, tightly managing your cash, extending the runway, make a validation app, attracting new investors, always.
Yeah, but it is interesting now that you mention it. I mean, it is a business game, and the business is essential. That's what we're building. But I've been going back and forth to Silicon Valley for almost 30 years now. And I feel like what's happening in Japan is similar to the way of thinking that was in Silicon Valley in the 90s and early 2000s. That there is still a lot of what you're talking about, that many people here in Japan are thinking about how will this help society and how will this be a good thing for everyone? And I think that thinking has become much less important in the US these days.
Of course, to run the business game is essential, right? But I realized to make a good product means to make, of course, a sellable product, right? To make the product popular. But at the same time, you have to think about how you can excite the people. That's very important. I think it's getting more important these days. If people get excited about the product, they don't buy it.
It's almost a cliche to talk about, making software the users love or making software that delights the users. And all the big companies say that, but I think you're right. It has changed recently. So, when we're using Facebook, for example, or Twitter, it's rarely because we really enjoy using it. It's almost like we feel like we have to. Whereas the secret really seems to be making software that delight the users. That Do you see that in Japan? Are more and more people doing that, do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
And for example, I think you have seen a lot of demo of generative AI. But generative AI's demo is not exciting, like AI agent type thing, right? It's very smart and very creative sometimes, but it doesn't excite you. So more application is more exciting, right? Application using generative AI in the behind is more excitement because people can feel how I can benefit from this product day to day. So how I can create very exciting product by using generative AI is getting more important, including UI, UX, and look and feel.
And making sure they're solving a real problem.
Exactly. Because generative AI is not the objective. Generative AI is just a tool.
Exactly.
And help them to solve their problems.
Awesome. Well, listen, Kunio, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. You're welcome.
And we're back. One of the most interesting aspects about how Beatrust has been rolling out their product offering is how they have slowly peeled the onion of the multi-layered challenge of getting people to collaborate within the enterprise. Selling SaaS was not enough, so Beatrust began offering more hands-on onboarding. That was not enough, so they began offering deeper consulting. And of course, they then began developing their successes into detailed case studies. Beatrust knows as well as anyone else that you can't change culture by installing new software or deploying new technology. There is a natural and frankly somewhat tragic human tendency to use technology and metrics as a way to avoid hard decisions or difficult conversations. Companies set worthy goals like minimizing overtime, increasing collaboration, or improving diversity. Middle management then breaks the goals down into KPIs and OKRs. And then hundreds of innovative software startups offer cutting-edge solutions to track and optimize the process. The startups grow, the metrics are achieved, the problems are declared solved. But are they? Kunio and Beatrust would say no, and they'd be right. Business cultures, and national cultures for that matter, are based on the incentives that are in place. Metrics, policy statements, and SaaS software can't counteract that. I mean, we humans are incredibly good at figuring out the difference between what the company says is important and what actually gets rewarded. If an employee's manager doesn't want them wasting time helping staff from another division, then it doesn't matter how easy you make it for them to do so. If you want to change the culture, you have to change the incentives. Kunio and Beatrust get this. Publicizing their successes internally increases sales, of course, but it also starts to fix the incentives by showing upper management who can deliver measurable business value from collaboration. Granted, doing this kind of long-term hands-on consulting is a lot more work than simply selling an enterprise license to HR, and that's probably why so few startups choose to go this route. But, that's the way to generate real change. There is a world of difference between selling a solution and solving a problem. If you want to talk more about changing cultures or corporate collaboration, Kunio and I would love to hear from you. So come by disruptingjapan.com/show233 and let's talk about it. And hey, if you enjoy Disrupting Japan, share a link online or just, tell people about it. Disrupting Japan is free forever, and letting people know about it is the absolute best way you can support the podcast. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups and VC know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.